Welcome to another wonderful Grace Austen audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean Regency Romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Grace Austen, Regency Romance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. The Earl's Missing Christmas Heir. Chapter 1. The end was coming for the Earl of Rosedale. He could feel himself growing weaker, and he knew that it could not be much longer now. Reflecting on his life, he mulled over the one regret that stood out above all the others. With a sigh, he pulled the thick blanket over his chest to ward off the growing cold. He hoped his solicitor would arrive soon. As the Earl lay in the ornately carved oak bed, he prayed that the provisions in his will would somehow make up for a decision he now bitterly regretted. He felt the sting of remorse so deeply that it brought tears of sorrow to his eyes. At least now, he told himself, he had tried to rectify the situation. The Earl felt that his efforts at compensation would permit him to depart this life, leaving all his descendants well provided for. He only wished his solicitor would make haste. His time was running out. Before he closed his eyes forever, he desperately desired the assurance that he had not overlooked some final detail that would nullify his request or put his plan in jeopardy. The Earl was not prone to foolish ideas. He was well aware that his children, George, Augusta, and Marjorie would be less than pleased with the distribution of his wealth. He had ensured that they were well provided for, but like any father faced with the prospect of his own looming mortality, he could now see his life story with previously ignored clarity. His 3 children were suited to their station, they were well-mannered and well-behaved as proper members of society, yet he knew their vices included greed, vanity, and pride. He was aware, painfully so in this dark hour, that the wishes clearly defined in his will would be met with hostility. The solicitor would therefore be invaluable to him to ease his mind and bring comfort to his soul as he prepared to leave his earthly affairs behind. From his bed, the Earl gazed upon the stern countenance of his son George, the eldest of the 3, and upon the anxious faces of his daughters. They were seated at his bedside, dutifully maintaining a vigil until his death. He looked at his daughters, and he could see his departed wife's features and dark auburn hair, but not the kindness that had shone in her eyes. He wished that his wife had lived long enough to impart her charity and good nature to the children, but sadly he had raised them to adulthood with the knowledge and skills they needed for their duties as a proper lord and ladies, but without the compassion he had treasured in his wife. Again, he thought about his wife and hoped that he had led a life worthy of heaven, for surely she resided there. She had passed away many years ago, and there was not a day that went by when he did not think of her. His one consolation in death was that he stood a chance of reuniting with his lost love. He closed his eyes and remembered her smile and her lovely laugh. He was lost in his memories when a footman announced the arrival of the solicitor, Mr. Stephen Montgomery. The Earl greeted him with as hearty a welcome as he could muster with his waning strength. "Mr. Montgomery, I am pleased that you were able to arrive before my demise." "Yes, Lord Rosedale, I apologize for any delay in my arrival. George, Augusta, and Marjorie, would you be so kind as to give your father a few minutes of privacy with Mr. Montgomery?" "Father, we have no wish to leave you, not even for a moment," stated Marjorie as she dabbed at her eyes with a lace-trimmed handkerchief. Augusta bristled. "Truly, is it so important that we must leave? Mr. Montgomery can have nothing to say that we cannot hear. I appreciate your devotion, but do indulge me. This will be one of the last favors that I ever ask of any of you." "Yes, father," the daughters answered, albeit begrudgingly. They stood and joined their older brother at the door. Much to the Earl's relief, they left him alone with the solicitor. The Earl of Rosedale raised his hand slightly. "Would you be so good as to close the door?" he asked Mr. Montgomery. "I do not want our conversation to be overheard by the staff or my children. I would like to enjoy the privilege of passing in peace and not at the center of a family crisis." Mr. Montgomery closed the door and walked to the bedside of the Earl. He lowered his voice and said, "I understand your insistence that the amendments to your will remain confidential until after your funeral. It is for precisely this reason that I was delayed this afternoon. There were several details regarding your affairs that I wanted to oversee personally, to ensure that they were irrevocable." "Are they irrevocable? Can they be overturned or appealed?" asked the Earl, concern edging his voice. No, Lord Rosedale, they cannot. Your wishes will be carried out, and you may rest assured that all will be as you have arranged. I will see to it. You have my solemn vow." The Earl looked at the younger man sitting beside his bed. The solicitor resembled his father, the elder deceased Mr. Montgomery, a great deal. The Montgomery firm had been entrusted with handling the Earl's affairs for many years. The Earl of Rosedale trusted the younger Mr. Montgomery, just as he had trusted the elder. "I am sure you are aware that your resemblance to your father in mannerisms and profile is remarkable. I have been told that I do bear a strong resemblance to him. I consider it an honor to have been his son, may God rest his soul. Your father was a worthy man. I have been most fortunate that you and your family's firm will be overseeing my matters, as they will require delicacy. I am grateful for your continued trust in me, and you have my word that your final wishes will be executed in the exact manner you have requested. Thank you. I know you will handle any difficulties that may arise judiciously and with compassion." "Yes. That is precisely what I intend to do." Chapter 2. Justina worked as hard as she possibly could. Dinner was at 8, and she only had a few more minutes to finish repairing the tear in the seam of the silken gown. Keeping a watchful eye on the clock in the servants' hall, she searched in her sewing basket for thread that matched the emerald green of the gown. It was hopeless. She did not have any thread that color. As she faced the unpleasant prospect of informing the mistress that her gown would not be ready, she remembered that she had one more hope, and that was the housekeeper, Mrs. Stratton. All of this anguish could have been avoided if only her mistress had not changed her mind 3 times that day. Justina could not hope to understand how the emerald green gown was any better than the other 3 gowns that her mistress had decided against in the last 5 hours. But that thought brought her little consolation as she rushed to have the gown ready for her mistress to wear that very night. She dashed down the hallway to the housekeeper's office and was disappointed to find her not there. The dinner party promised to be a large and important affair, and so Justina was certain that Mrs. Stratton was busy making last-minute preparations, but where could she be? She was about to begin systematically searching through the house when she heard the unmistakable high-pitched voice of the housekeeper arguing with the cook. Breathing a sigh of relief, she rushed to the kitchen. "I told you we were going to be serving 40 people. What do you mean you don't have enough for the main course?" asked Mrs. Stratton, turning red with rage. "I wasn't expecting them all to be coming to dinner." "That never happens," answered the cook. "I don't see how that is going to get us out of this," Mrs. Stratton snapped. "I will come up with something." "We may have to change the menu a bit," the cook offered, as her fingers worked at the edges of her apron. "Change the menu? And who will have to hear about it?" "Me, that's who. You know how the missus can be." Justina did not want to ask Mrs. Stratton anything at the moment, but she was left with no other option. She walked into the kitchen, and at first, she was not noticed, but then both ladies must have realized they had an audience. "Justina, what is the meaning of this? Do you always make a habit of lurking about listening in on people's private conversations?" asked Mrs. Stratton, turning her anger towards Justina. Justina was astonished that Mrs. Stratton was under the impression that the conversation in the kitchen, as loud as it was, had ever been private. Still she dealt with the accusation with grace. "Mrs. Stratton, I apologize for the intrusion. I simply must have your help." "What can be so important that you would interrupt me?" demanded the housekeeper. "It's for the missus. She will be unhappy if I do not finish the repair to her gown, and I find myself in need of emerald thread." "Thread? That is what this is all about." "Yes. I was hoping you would be able to help me." "Are you useless? How can you expect to be a lady's maid if you have no hope of solving a simple matter of thread? Go look in my sewing box and leave me alone." "Thank you," mumbled Justina as she left the 2 ladies to continue their argument. She returned to the housekeeper's office and rummaged through the sewing kit. She found a thread that was nearly the same color and hoped that if she made the stitches small enough, it would suffice. Time was running out, and the mismatched thread was her only hope. A half-hour later, she ran upstairs with the mended dress and rushed to her mistress's room, knocking gently on the door. "Come in." Justina ushered herself in and closed the door. "It is about time." "What took you so long?" asked Lady Harrington in a frustrated tone. Justina wanted to remind her mistress that she had changed her mind repeatedly and then selected a gown that used to fit her when she was quite a bit slimmer. The seam in the gown was sure to rip again, and Justina could only hope that the repair would hold for the evening. "I am sorry. I do offer my apologies. Here is the dress. I cannot begin to tell you how disappointed I am." The woman clucked her tongue with disgust. "I am afraid that if you do not show improvement, I will be forced to make other arrangements for a lady's maid. Now do something with my hair and be quick about it." Justina felt anxious whenever Lady Harrington threatened her with dismissal. She had tried to do everything she could to satisfy her employer's constant demands, but there simply was no pleasing the woman. Tonight was just another instance when her mistress would be disappointed and angry and would find a way to see that Justina bore the brunt of her unhappiness. Reluctantly, Justina endured the constant barrage of verbal and mental abuse that were part and parcel of her employment at the Harringtons. She could not afford to lose her position. If she was no longer employed by the Harringtons and was forced to leave without a reference, her future would be uncertain. She could very well end up living on the streets or forced into a workhouse. She fought back the tears as she swept up Lady Harrington's hair. Justina breathed a sigh of relief when at last her mistress was dressed for dinner. With a few moments free, she went down to the servants' hall. She sat by the fire with a novel and a bracing cup of tea. Later that evening, Lady Harrington rang for Justina. Justina sighed, her moments of peace were at an end. She climbed the narrow servants' stairway and answered her mistress's summons. Arriving at her mistress's chambers, she found Lady Harrington to be in a most unhappy mood. "Justina, how can such an embarrassment occur? I am sure that I do not know, my lady. If I may be so bold, what occurred? Dinner was nearly ruined, and my dress was not repaired properly. Just look at it." Lady Harrington nearly spat her disdain as she pointed to a rip in the seam of her dress. Justina was preparing to point out to her mistress that the rip in the seam was on the opposite side of the dress from the repair, but she did not have the chance. Her mistress walked up to her and grabbed her by the arm. "Justina, you have ruined dinner and this dress. What have you to say for yourself?" Justina wriggled her arm free of Lady Harrington's grip, and her mistress slapped her across the face. "Don't be impertinent. You failed to tell the housekeeper how many guests were coming for dinner, and the cook had to change my menu, and it's your fault my dress ripped again." Justina stood in stunned silence with her hand on her face. She had never felt so helpless in her life. She could not believe this woman was blaming her for dinner. She had nothing whatsoever to do with the preparations of dinner, nor was she to blame for the fact that Lady Harrington could no longer fit into a dress. She looked at the floor and considered her options. As her mistress continued her angry tirade, Justina was forced to listen to her insults and her abuse. She thought about the prospect of a workhouse and decided that as horrible as she found her current situation to be, it was still preferable to the grim conditions of life as a pauper. "Get over here and undress me, you ungrateful wretch. I ought to have you tossed out of here on your ear." Justina complied with her mistress's wishes and tried to avoid eye contact as she undressed the woman and prepared her for bed. She was relieved when her mistress asked for nothing else from her before retiring. Justina picked up the torn evening gown from the floor and left the bedroom, closing the door behind her. Her face burned where her mistress had slapped it, but at least she was free of her odious presence until the following morning. She walked towards the servants' stairs and was momentarily consoled by the fact that her evening could get no worse, but she was wrong. "Well, what have we here?" She heard the voice of Sir Harrington in the hallway and turned to face him. It was obvious by his slurred speech that he had been drinking. Justina hoped that he would not prove to be as ill-tempered as his wife. "Good evening, sir," she muttered, trying to slip away as quickly as possible. "Where are you going?" he asked as he stumbled closer to her. "To the servants' hall, my lord. I have to repair this dress." There is no need to hurry away." Justina glanced into his bleary eyes and felt fear inch up her spine. He was standing close to her, and she could smell the brandy on his breath. Sir Harrington had never said very much to her, and she was unsure what his intentions were that evening. However, he soon made them abundantly clear by running his fingers slowly down her arm. She went stiff. "Sir Harrington, if you will excuse me, I must finish this." She clasped the dress to her chest like a shield and took a step back. For your wife. Now, is that any way to treat your master? You will stay as long as I choose. Yes, my lord, she answered, dropping her gaze. That's better. You are rather handsome for a lady's maid. Rather handsome, indeed. He touched her face in the exact spot where his wife had slapped her. Justina winced involuntarily, both from the pain and from a growing sense of revulsion. Sir, please. I must work on this dress for her ladyship. I do not care about the dress, and what's more, I am not overly fond of her ladyship. I do not find her as pleasing as I find you. He moved closer until she had no place to go. He pressed her against a tapestry on the wall with his bulk. Justina's eyes stretched wide and panic swept through her. How could she get out of this without losing her position? She considered burning him with the candle sitting on the side table, making it look like an accident. But if she did, her dismissal would be sure. Her mind whirled. He was breathing heavily, loud gasps that rasped up his throat. She screwed up her courage. My lord, I am afraid I am quite ill. Please let me pass. He stumbled a bit, pressing her harder into the wall. Ill? You look well enough to me, he growled. I do not mean to be indelicate, sir, but I am ill with a sickness only women are prone to. Oh, that is different. Why didn't you confess earlier? He recalled with what looked like disgust. He staggered away from her, but before he left her trembling in the hallway, he added, another time then. She scampered to the other side of the hall. When she realized he was no longer in sight, she ran toward the stairs. She changed her mind about her destination and did not stop running until she reached her small quarters. Throwing the green evening gown on her bed, she slumped onto the chair by the small fireplace. She had no intention of repairing the dress that evening, not after what she had endured. Lighting the fire in the fireplace with a candle, she huddled by it for warmth. All she could hope for was that her master was so drunk he would forget about his interest in her, and that her mistress would change her mind about throwing her out. It had been a horrible night, and she did not know how she would be able to remain employed by such a hateful woman and such a lecherous man. Bleak despair filled her as she cried herself to sleep that night. Chapter 3. Stephen Montgomery arrived at the residence of Sir Arthur Harrington unannounced. Sir Harrington was a knight, and Stephen normally worked for earls, marquises, and dukes. He felt no need to kowtow to the man by arranging his appearance beforehand. Arthur Harrington's reputation went before him, and it was not pleasant. Besides, Stephen was not there to see him in any case. The solicitor was aware that Sir Harrington outranked him, but his business relationship with the upper class had given him the impression that he, too, was of high standing, especially when he was charged with performing a duty for one of his wealthier clients, as was the case that day. His carriage arrived after luncheon. A footman met him at the door and accepted his card, inviting him into the foyer. Mr. Montgomery, is Sir Harrington expecting you? No, but I am afraid you are mistaken. I am not here to see your master. Is there a Miss Justina Stanley employed in this house? Sir, if you will excuse me, you will want to speak with the mistress, Lady Harrington. Please wait in the drawing room. The footman showed Stephen into the modest but well-appointed room. Stephen waited patiently and remained standing. He was in no mood to socialize with the woman. He had business with Justina. He was quietly appraising the net worth of the family by their modest decor when the lady of the house arrived to greet him. I am Lady Harrington. What is the nature of this visit? She asked in a haughty manner. I am Stephen Montgomery, solicitor. I am here on behalf of the Earl of Rosedale. My footman tells me that you have made an inquiry regarding my lady's maid. Is that correct? It is. I need to see her at once. It is a matter of some importance. What has she done? Why would your employer have an interest in my maid? Stephen detested the smug sense of superiority of the woman standing across from him. She was the wife of a knight, and yet she acted as though she was a person of the highest standing. Stephen gave her a very polite smile. That does not concern you in the slightest. I desire to see her at once. Flustered, Lady Montgomery turned to the footman and ordered him to bring Justina to the drawing room. The silence between Stephen and this overbearing woman would have been uncomfortable if he cared about her opinion, but he did not. The clock ticked loudly on the mantel as he waited patiently for Justina. The footman arrived minutes later, accompanied by a petite young woman. She was an ethereal beauty with dark auburn curls, a heart-shaped face and the most arresting green eyes he had ever seen. He had not expected her to be so beautiful, and he was riveted by her handsome countenance. To the amazement of Lady Harrington, he bowed to Justina and introduced himself. "Lady Justina Stanley, it is an honor to make your acquaintance. I am Stephen Montgomery, solicitor to the Earl of Rosedale. Please forgive my abrupt presence, but I feel that it is incumbent upon me to make haste. Sir, I beg your pardon. I do not know the Earl of Rosedale." Stephen could tell from the sound of her voice that she was nervous. He would do everything he could to make her comfortable. "Lady Justina, may I suggest that you sit down and steel yourself for some rather important news?" "Justina, don't you dare sit on the furniture," Lady Harrington said to the girl. Then she turned her attention to the solicitor. "You are asking my maid to sit down in my drawing room? Sir, are you forgetting who owns this house and whose hospitality you are intruding upon? Lady Harrington, this young lady is only your maid due to an unfortunate set of circumstances. In a moment, you may wish that you had struck a decidedly different tone when addressing her. Now if you will excuse us, I have business to discuss with Lady Justina. I am not leaving." Lady Harrington stuck out her bosom in the most unfortunate of stances. "I insist that you put an immediate end to this masquerade at once. Justina has work to do if she would like to retain her position." Stephen knew that he was going to enjoy this more than he should. He detested social snobbery, and he was well pleased that Lady Harrington chose to stay so he could watch her reaction to the incredible news he had to share. Stephen cleared his throat and stated, "Very well. As you wish." He turned his attention to the servant girl. "Lady Justina, I regret to inform you of the recent passing of the 8th Earl of Rosedale. You are his daughter and the half-sister to the heir of the title, George Merchant. Your rank in society is lady, and you have been formally recognized in the Earl's will. The Earl made arrangements that you be endowed with a generous annuity and a dowry at the time of his death. Your immediate presence is required at the home of your family at Helmsford Park." Lady Harrington's gasp was audible. Justina looked ready to faint. Despite her employer's admonition not to sit on the furniture, she plopped down on the upholstered settee with a look of shock. "But sir, I am an orphan. I was raised by a Mrs. Waverley of Grangerton before my employment. As much as I would like this fairy tale to be true, I am afraid that I am not a lady. My dear, it was the Earl himself who made arrangements for Mrs. Waverley to oversee your upbringing. Now, gather up your belongings. I would like to be on our way within the half-hour." Lady Harrington stood frozen in shock, blinking her eye stupidly at what to her must have been inconceivable news. "Mr. Montgomery, you are mistaken. My maid cannot possibly be the daughter of an earl. Lady Harrington, it gives me great joy to inform you that from this moment on, you must address her as the Lady Justina. You are to show her all the respect and honor that one of her class requires. This is an outrage. Furthermore, Lady Harrington," said Stephen with his best elocution, "she outranks you considerably, and I dare say that with her annuity she could buy your entire property and still have money left over to spend on hats and gowns for her delight. Good day to you." "Sir, so it is true? I am a lady?" asked Justina, her eyes wide. "Yes, it is true. Shall we be going?" "Allow me 5 minutes, and I will meet you at the carriage." "Very good, Lady Justina." Justina stood up and with a smile that seemed to light up her whole face, she raced out of the drawing room and rather than running up the cramped servant steps, she took the main staircase, reserved for those of family rank. Of course, she had to switch to the servant stairs from the second floor to continue up to the attic, however, she gloried in using the main stairs at all. Chapter 4. Justina smiled with shocked disbelief at the news she had just been delivered. She took the final flight of steps 2 at a time as made her way to her attic quarters. She grabbed the small stack of books that belonged to her along with her clothes and belongings. With shaking hands, she shoved everything she owned into a threadbare carpet bag. A few minutes later, she rushed back downstairs, out the front door, and into the waiting carriage. She was a maid no more. Justina could scarcely imagine what was happening. She was a lady, a real lady. She could not have been happier if she had been told that she was suddenly a princess. She stared out of the window of the carriage, trying desperately to get a glimpse of Helmsford Park, but all she saw were rolling hills and farmhouses. Lady Justina, I assure you that you are in no danger of missing Helmsford Park, Stephen said with a smile. Oh, I know. I simply cannot wait to see it with my own eyes. Then maybe I will believe that all of this is real. My lady, it is quite real. You may rely on it. The solicitor was grinning now. Justina blushed at his smile. He was so handsome and charming, and he treated her with deference, making her feel like a lady despite her plain clothes and worn-out shoes. And there she was sitting with him as his equal. No, she realized with a start. Her new standing ranked her even higher. It was a world gone mad. Mr. Montgomery, sir, I am not sure I understand how this happened. Please explain to me once more. It would be my pleasure, he answered in a calm, soothing tone. Your father was married secretly to your mother many years ago. It was a frowned-upon relationship. To maintain his ranking in society, your father kept the alliance a secret. After your birth, your mother became frail and ill. Unfortunately, she passed away. Your father was heartbroken, but he continued to keep the entire affair secret. After your mother's death, he arranged for your care with Mrs. Waverley. Justina didn't take her eyes from Stephen's face. Her mind whirled, trying to digest what he was telling her. So, no one knew of his marriage to my mother, she asked, incredulous. No one knew. Stephen shook his head. A fact that your father came to regret. He ended up marrying again, a match that was condoned by his parents. He subsequently had 3 more children. Your half-siblings. I have siblings, Justina shook her head with wonder. The Earl was beside himself with grief, but felt that since you were born in mystery he could not acknowledge you. He paid Mrs. Waverley to raise you. He came to regret that decision, and upon his death, he wanted to ensure that you had every luxury and privilege that you had been denied because he had not claimed you publicly. In his will, he has officially recognized you as a daughter and has seen to your future wealth. When shall I meet my brother and sisters? Upon our arrival. Although, I must warn you that there may be some concerns. Why would there be concerns? Your brother has inherited the land, the title, and the property. Your sisters have generous dowries set up in their names, but you have been granted an extravagant annuity and a large dowry. There may be some jealousy. They would be jealous of me. Justina couldn't fathom the notion. Yes, I am afraid so. Your father was quite wealthy, and you are now one of the wealthiest young ladies in all of England. Your annuity is worth more than what your father left to your sisters. Justina's eyes grew even wider. I am wealthy. Yes, my dear, you are wealthy, Stephen said as he patted her hand. Forgive me for calling you dear. I feel honored to be able to assist you in any way that I can. I'm delighted to have been the messenger to bring you such good news. I had great respect for your father, and I am privileged to be the man he trusted with his last wishes. Thank you, she said. Her cheeks grew warm. Mr. Montgomery was so handsome, and when he touched her hand, she felt an unaccustomed spark of excitement. He was the first man who had ever showed her any inclination of kindness. Lady Justina, there over the horizon, you will see your new home, Helmsford Park. Justina bit her lip with excitement. She peered out the window just as the grand establishment came into view. It was enormous, much larger than she had dared to expect. The house was a grey stone mansion with many windows and corner towers, and it stood easily 4 stories tall. Mr. Montgomery, is that it? Can that really be Helmsford Park? It is your new home. How many rooms does it have? It looks to be amazingly large. By my estimation, nearly 100, counting the servants' quarters. I am unable to believe this. This cannot be real. It will all be real soon enough. Once you have arrived and are settled, we must prepare you for your life as a lady. We must order a wardrobe for you at once. I have been given the responsibility of overseeing these details. We do not have much time. Your brother will be hosting a hunting party in 2 weeks, and there will be dinners and a ball. You must have the proper attire to look the part of a lady of society. Justina gripped the side of the carriage. Sir, you have been so good to me. I'm sure I shall never be able to repay you. It is my pleasure to assist you in any way that I can. It is not every day that I am graced with a client as beautiful as you. Justina felt heat creep up her neck. She averted her eyes, but it didn't matter. His finely chiseled face, his dark curls and his probing, mysterious eyes were imprinted on her mind. His easy smile and charm made her feel as though she actually was beautiful, a feeling that was indeed strange and unfamiliar to her. I don't know what to say, she murmured. Do not say a word. And do not worry about anything. Your joy is my reward. Your father would have wanted to see you happy, and I gave my word to make that happen. Justina gazed at the handsome solicitor as the carriage turned into the tree-lined lane leading to the house. He smiled at her with warmth, and his eyes were kind. She glanced out the window, overcome with nerves as they drew closer to the house. She clasped and unclasped her hands, feeling their dampness. How would her siblings receive her? She had always wanted brothers and sisters, and now her wish was about to come true. She prayed they would welcome her with kindness. They arrived at the entrance of Helmsford Park and Stephen assisted her as she stepped out of the carriage. He walked with her to the door and past the staff as they curtsied and bowed. Justina giggled nervously. She was being treated exactly as she imagined royalty would be. Just inside the door, they were met by a man who was dressed in an expensive tailored jacket and trousers. Justina had been a maid long enough to recognize the craftsmanship that went into his clothes and his boots. She realized to her astonishment that she must be in the presence of her half-brother, the 9th Earl of Rosedale. Justina, it is a pleasure to welcome you home, he said somewhat stiffly. Justina curtsied, my lord, it is my pleasure. He waved his hand through the air. We are family. You have no need to curtsy or address me in such a manner. You may call me George. May I present your sisters, Augusta and Marjorie? Any warmth Justina may have felt at her brother's welcome was soon forgotten with the icy stares she received from her half-sisters. In the last hour, she had been looking forward to having sisters, but she soon learned that her sisters were not of the same mind. They definitely were not pleased to be related by blood to a lady's maid. Lady Augusta. Lady Marjorie. I am so happy to meet you, she said, swallowing hard. Lady Augusta huffed out her breath. You do not have to call us lady, since you are no longer a servant. If you are to call Helmsford Park home, you better learn how to behave, or else I fear you will be an embarrassment. Justina felt ashamed. Yes, of course. Lady Marjorie smirked. And those clothes. I hope no one important sees you in our house wearing such a dress. They will think you are a scullery maid. Augusta, Marjorie, be civil, George said. Justina looked at Stephen and mouthed the words, don't leave me. The solicitor reached for her hand and gave it a little squeeze. If Justina had been raised as a lady, she would have known how forward his behavior was, but she did not recognize it as such. She felt much better and wished that he could stay at Helmsford Park. She did not want to be left alone with these people who were her family. Chapter 5. Justina looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was unable to believe that the upper-class lady staring back at her was truly her. She was dressed in a cerulean gown with silver gossamer embroidery. Her maid, Patience, had twisted her hair and interlaced silver ribbon in the curls in an elaborate style that made her neck appear long and graceful. The gown was made of a silk that was far more exquisite than any material she had ever worn before in her life. She looked as though she were a fairy princess, she only wished that she would be able to act the part. She was terrified that she would forget her manners. Tonight was to be the first dinner party she had ever attended, and she knew that all eyes would be on her. She took a deep breath and tried to remember everything she had been told. Oh, Patience, I am so nervous. My lady, just watch everyone else and do what they do. You will be fine. No one expects you to be perfect. Just enjoy yourself and don't drink too much wine as you aren't used to it. You have done such a good job making me look like a real lady. What would I do without you? My sisters expect me to be perfect. They told me not to embarrass them. Nonsense, you go show them you are just as much a lady as they are. They aren't so perfect themselves. Justina could tell by Patience's tone that there was no love lost between her maid and her half-sisters. Justina giggled. She was grateful for Patience. She knew that she was acting with more familiarity than was proper, but she couldn't care. Patience seemed to be her only friend in the house. Her maid was an older woman, and she doted on her young mistress, which Justina deeply appreciated. My lady, forgive me for speaking so harshly about your ladyship's sisters. I meant no disrespect. None taken. This is your last chance, Patience. Do you want to trade places? Patience threw up her hands with exaggerated horror. No, I do not. What would I have to say to those hoity-toities downstairs? The same as me, not a word. I will just smile and act interested. Seems to me your training as a lady's maid will do you well. You are terrible, but you make a good point. Justina looked at her reflection again. Yes, I do, my lady. Thank you for this, Patience. For your kindness and friendship. Perhaps I can see that you have an increase in wages. No promises, however. I have no idea how these things work. How do I look? Justina twirled in front of Patience. You look like a lady. But no twirling, I'm thinking. And no sliding down the banister. Justina laughed again. You should have been a court jester at Prince Regent's palace. I will say a little prayer for you, my lady. Just hold your head up and remember, you have just as much a right to be here as any of them. Thank you, said Justina quietly as she took a deep breath and walked out of her chambers toward the grand marble staircase. This was to be the first event of the hunting party that was hosted at the estate every year. Tonight, Justina would be attending the dinner and seated at the table with members of the aristocracy. Her heart pounded, and she could scarcely contain her excitement or her fear. She knew that she looked the part. Now, she just had to act the part. She had never felt so anxious as she descended the stairs into the great hall. Justina heard voices coming from the drawing room, and she knew that there were to be over 30 guests in attendance. All eyes would be on her as she walked into that room, and she was not sure she was ready to take the first step. She thought she might take a few minutes by herself to collect her thoughts. She walked to the enormous stone fireplace in the great hall and stood in front of it, watching the fire dance as the logs burned. The crest of the Earl of Rosedale was carved in the stone above the fireplace. She was the daughter of the Earl of Rosedale. She should be strong and proud that she was a member of this family, no matter what anyone thought of her. She gathered her wits and tried to find the inner strength to face the room full of strangers. How she dreaded facing the disgusted glares of her half-sisters. She was so lost in her thoughts that she did not hear someone walk up behind her until it was too late. My lady, are you quite well? The masculine voice was deep and resonant. Justina gasped in surprise and turned to face a tall man with blonde hair and the features of an aristocrat. He looked like a prince, and she wondered if he was, as she curtsied before him. Yes, my lord, I am quite well. I am pleased to see that you are. I thought you may have caught a chill. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Charles Seaton, Duke of Wockshire. It is my pleasure to make your acquaintance. Oh dear. I mean, Your Grace. I am Justina Stanley, daughter of the late Earl of Rosedale. Please forgive me, I have never stood in the presence of a duke before. Charles smiled at her, his eyes shining with clear admiration. Justina wondered at how he really perceived her. She assumed by his deference and cordial manner that he was ready to accept her as part of the ton. The flames are reflected in your green eyes, Justina Stanley. I dare say you are not only stunning, but unaware of it. Justina's lips parted. She had no idea how to respond. My dear, it is true that I am a duke. But to you, I am to be only Charles Seaton, since you are the half-sister of the present Earl, my good friend George. Yes, Your Grace. I am the newest member of the family. Your story is quite interesting, although I doubt I am privy to the whole of it. I am sure that all of these changes must be overwhelming. You speak about it as though you know everything. I do have you at a disadvantage. I know most of the facts of your story from your brother, and you know nothing of me. That hardly seems sporting, does it? I'm embarrassed to admit that I was a lady's maid before I suddenly became part of this family. Do not be embarrassed. It seems to me that you are living a novel. I would consider myself fortunate if I were you to have had such an adventure in life. Surely not, Your Grace, she said. While I was working as a maid, I am not certain I would have described my situation as fortunate. It was taxing work. Not many people are ever granted the opportunity to be both a maid and a lady. I dare say you have experiences and stories that would make for an interesting book, and I'm sure you could entertain almost anyone in conversation. I can honestly tell you without fear of reproach that not many ladies would be as interesting to speak with as you. Your Grace, thank you. That is most kind of you to say. My sisters have treated me as though I still belong downstairs in the servants' hall. I fully expect them to ask me to fetch them tea or prepare their bath. Yet, you tell me that I should embrace my past and wear it proudly. This seems most unusual. I would wager that your sisters' comments are motivated by jealousy. You are far more handsome than either of them, and in case you have failed to notice, neither of them is married, despite their rank. As to the matter of your past, embrace it. You were not born into this life, why pretend that you were? I believe with your beauty and your title that soon, it won't matter who you were before this moment. A lady might not be proud of such a past, but then you are quite extraordinary. Your Grace, your words are most reassuring. I will pay heed to your thoughts, but may I be so bold as to ask a question? By all means, I look forward to your inquiry. Why are you in the Great Hall and not in the drawing room with the other members of society? I am afraid you have caught me. I was making my escape to the library before dinner when I beheld you, a beautiful lady, possibly in distress, languishing by the fireplace. In truth, I find small talk tedious, and the conversations at such events quite dull. You have held my attention for the better part of 10 minutes. I wager that is record for me. Are ladies in society so boring that you are unable to endure their conversation? This was a completely new thought to Justina. Lady Justina, I believe that you will soon enjoy the pleasure of finding out for yourself the answer to that question. I was going to the library, but now that I have found you, would you do me the honor of allowing me to escort you to the drawing room? Yes, Your Grace, I would like that very much. As would I. But you must promise me that you will not discuss fashion, hairstyles, or gossip. Do I have your solemn promise? Justina laughed. You have my word. I would not know where to begin to discuss fashion and hairstyles. And I am unaware of any gossip, except regarding myself. Then we will get along splendidly, said Charles as he held out his arm for her. She placed her hand atop his, and together they walked into the drawing room. All eyes turned to watch them as they joined her brother George. George and Charles laughed as old friends do, and Justina stood in their presence trying not to feel self-conscious. She was entranced by Charles. She could not keep herself from gazing upon his face as his blue eyes sparkled when he laughed. She had always imagined dukes to be stuffy and unapproachable, but he was different. He was cool in his demeanor and manners, yet his smile was warm. And he had treated her, a former lady's maid, as though she were a duchess. He had made her feel as though she belonged in the room full of upper-class ladies and lords. In his presence, she believed that she could brave the icy stares from her sisters and the gossipy whispers from the guests. In the presence of this duke, she could forget to be nervous. She told herself that if a duke found her company acceptable, there was no reason why she should be shunned by the lords and ladies of the ton. She was wealthy and had a title, whether they chose to accept it or not. She was by rank, one of them. She was a lady, now. She just hoped that she could remember which fork to use at dinner. Chapter 6. The hunting party had gone more successfully than Justina had hoped. She had not made a complete fool of herself at dinner, and the Duke kept her from being lonely for much of the time surrounding the meal. She only felt out of place when she was alone in the drawing room after dinner with the ladies. By their very bearing and their talk, they seemed to consider themselves the select group of society, or the privileged few within upper-class society. Justina quickly discovered that all the members of the Ton were ladies and lords, but not all lords and ladies were members of the Ton. She learned that the Ton was a powerful clique that decided all manner of details of society, from fashion to who could join a club or be invited to tea. She soon found out that the ladies at the hunting party were all members of this elite clique. All of them, except one, of course, her. Rather than stand awkwardly in the drawing room, waiting for the gentlemen to return after their brandy and discussion of manly subjects in the smoking room, she made her way to the library instead. She found the company of books to be far superior to the social snubbing she was receiving at the hands of her sisters and their friends. As the weekend continued, Justina found herself escaping to the library with regularity. It was in the library that the Duke often found her during the evenings. She had always loved to read, and now she had thousands of books to choose from. The Duke confessed to her that he was an avid reader also, and he made recommendations of books she may enjoy. Oftentimes in the library, it was just the two of them, and they would spend a few minutes of pleasant conversation before joining the guests in the drawing room. It was there that Justina noticed that the gentlemen were far more receptive to speaking with her, while the ladies treated her as though she belonged back in the kitchen with the staff. She wondered if there might be some truth to what the Duke and the solicitor had said after all. Was it possible that the ladies were jealous of her? Justina had not seen Mr. Montgomery in a week, and she wondered if he was well. With a bit of consternation, she admitted to herself that she had become not only fond of Stephen Montgomery, but she rather depended on him in her new life. Her affection for Mr. Montgomery had a more comfortable, easy rhythm than her growing fondness for the Duke. For even with his kindness, the Duke seemed less approachable and more formidable than the solicitor. Justina felt confused when she considered her feelings for the two men. They were both undoubtedly handsome, and both treated her as a lady. When her thoughts ran along these lines, she scolded herself soundly. She was quite certain that neither would ever consider her as more than an acquaintance or friend. She needed to put her silly romantic notions aside. But that was easier said than done. Justina could not account for her mixed feelings, and she did her best not to dwell on them. Finally, she decided that she would rather spend her time as a friend enjoying the company of Charles Seton while he was with her, and then in the future, should he come around, she would enjoy the company of Mr. Montgomery as a friend. By the time the hunting party came to an end, the Duke and Justina had indeed become close after a fashion. He had been her friendly face amongst unfriendliness, and she hoped against hope that she would see him in the future. The last night as the ball ended, they spoke by the fire in the great hall. Justina felt breathless with both gratitude and something far more intimate. A warmth of affection spread through her as she gazed into his face. "Thank you for all that you have done for me. A man of your rank did not need to go to such lengths to make a former lady's maid feel so welcome." His eyes were dark, and his voice was low. "Justina, it has been my pleasure. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I have found your company to be enchanting, and I sincerely hope that you consider me to be a friend." And there it was. Those two words. A friend. "Why, yes, I do," she stammered. She should be pleased that he called her a friend. After all, wasn't that what she had been striving for? But something deep inside yearned for more. "I consider you to be one of my dearest friends. Are all dukes as kind of heart as you?" "That I cannot say, but I will look for you in London. The season will be beginning after the Christmas holiday, and I hope that you will be in attendance. I am sure that my sisters would prefer I stay home and not embarrass them, but I promise that I will be there," she said, suddenly decisive. "Your sisters and their friends are the product of idle time and idle minds." Justina smiled. "I try not to mind them so much. Although, I do hate feeling like they are laughing at everything I do or don't do." "My dear," he said, taking her hand in his large one, "do not worry. I will personally take you under my wing, and together we will make them beg for your friendship and good opinion." She grinned, enjoying the sensation of her hand in his. "I don't know about begging, but if they could find something else to occupy their time, I would be pleased. Have no worries." He let go of her hand. "In London, you will be certain to meet many more people than this small clique. I must confess that I have always detested their plotting and tedious ways. I will enjoy sparring with them, and you are to be the winner." "That sounds delightful. I will miss you." As soon as she uttered the words, Justina looked away, embarrassed that she had admitted such sentiment aloud. But the Duke looked pleased. "I have to admit that I shall miss you as well. These past few days have been most entertaining. I ask that you permit me a correspondence with you." "Why, yes. If you so choose." He leaned down and kissed her cheek as they stood by the fireplace. Justina's heart nearly bolted from her chest as she stared into his blue eyes. He wished her good evening, and with a charming smile, he turned away to take his leave. In the following weeks, the Duke kept his word. He sent her letters and even an early Christmas present, a small golden locket that was inscribed in Latin and English, "To thine own self, be true." It was such a thoughtful gift, the only gift she had received from a man, and from a duke no less. Near Christmas, the family gathered for dinner and to exchange presents. Justina thought it odd that they exchanged gifts so early in the season, but evidently their father, the Earl, preferred it that way. Justina was not surprised that the only gift she received was from her brother. Her sisters were cruel and seemed to be revel in their poor treatment of her. "We simply had no idea what you would like," Augusta purred from the settee. "We assumed we wouldn't be able to match the type of gifts you are accustomed to," Marjorie added, with a sly smile. It was then that Justina finally came to the conclusion that she would endure their undeserved hostility no more. She took a sip of wine, and as her sisters spoke French in front of her and laughed, her good nature reached its limits. She addressed them in a tone of voice that was not the least bit convivial. "Sisters, for weeks I have endured your rudeness and your efforts to make me feel as though I have no place in this house. What have I ever done to deserve your wrath?" Augusta straightened her posture to that of a cement pillar. She answered, "You do not have a place in our home. You do not belong here. Your suspicious birth makes you calling me your sister repulsive. I prefer that you leave and never come back." Justina gaped at her. Even knowing her nastiness, Justina had never thought Augusta would speak her mind so boldly. "Are you angered because of my money and the annuity? That money does not belong to you, and it never did. Father hid you away for a purpose. Just because he had a moment of guilt doesn't change anything. Your mother was common. Worthless to society." Augusta sniffed. "If it was not for you, we would have it as our right. Marjorie and I are the true daughters of the Earl of Rosedale. Instead, our inheritance is in the possession of the daughter of some trollop." Justina's anger grew. "How dare you call my mother a trollop? From what I have seen of your behavior, you are hardly better than one yourself. So, it is only the money? Take it then. I don't care." At that point, Justina was so hurt and angry, she hardly knew what she was saying. "We would never accept anything from you except your farewell." Augusta bit out the words. George cleared his throat. "Ladies, please. This is not how Father would want us to act. He was very clear in his will. Justina is a part of this family and should be treated as such." "That is easy for you to say," spit out Marjorie. "You have inherited property and a title, and what are we left with? We have only our dowries and your generosity. Maybe if you spiteful old cats were less cruel, you would be married by now." Justina cried, beyond caring. "Surely, you are well past marriageable age." "That is rich coming from you," said Augusta. "Fine," Justina said, the fight draining out of her. "If you insist that I leave, then I shall. George, I understand that we have a house in London. Is that correct?" "Yes, but it won't be open for a month." "Please. Can it be opened immediately?" "But the season doesn't begin until January." "Please, George." "I don't care, I can't spend another week in a house where I am clearly unwanted. I will leave first thing in the morning." "What about the staff?" he asked. "I care not what you do. As long as the house is open. If there are any expenses, take them from my account. I find myself in a unique position to afford it." George looked genuinely crestfallen by her decision. He let out his breath in a long sigh. "All right, Justina. I will have Mr. Montgomery handle it." "Perfect. If necessary, my dear sisters, you may make other arrangements for your stay in London when you come. I am certain that my presence would be too odious for you to share the same residence again." George, I will see you in January." She stood up and stormed out of the drawing room. It was Christmas time, the season of love and family, but Justina found herself leaving for London to escape her family and perhaps find a love and acceptance that she would never know at Helmsford Park. Chapter 7. The house in London was large. At first, Justina thought she would be lonely, wandering around as the only member of the family in residence. To the contrary, she loved every second of it. Her friendly maid Patience accompanied her to London, as did a member of the kitchen workers, a footman, and 2 housemaids. It was a small staff for the size of the house, but Justina only frequented the drawing room, the dining room, the library, and her bedchamber. Much to her delight, the staff that accompanied her was relaxed without the housekeeper and butler to strictly enforce every rule. After her time spent working as a maid to the Harringtons and then her rough treatment at the hands of her sisters, Justina rather enjoyed the peace and relaxed atmosphere of the roomy London house during the holiday season. It was magical. The upper class remained in their country estates for the month of December, but the wealthy Londoners had much to keep them occupied. Snow covered the trees in the park, and chestnut vendors were found on the corners. There were choir performances at churches and shows in the theatres. Justina was certain that no member of her family ever spent Christmas week in London, and she swore to herself that she would never miss it again. London was especially pleasant for Justina due to the presence of Mr. Montgomery. His firm had been the preferred legal establishment to the aristocracy for generations. He therefore enjoyed privilege and popularity. He not only kept Justina company, but he took her out and about. She was well received in the houses of his friends, and no one was overly concerned about anybody's status. It was nearly Christmas Day when she received a letter from the Duke. It was short and polite. When she had first arrived in London, she had sent him a letter. When a reply was not forthcoming, she assumed that he had forgotten about her, which she found curious. As much as Justina enjoyed herself with Mr. Montgomery, she found herself thinking of the Duke from time to time. However, when he did not answer her correspondence, she supposed that he did not miss her nearly as much as he'd said he would. Justina looked down at the gold locket he had sent to her as a present and wondered if she should take it off. She read the inscription once again and decided that she would continue wearing it, if only to remind herself that regardless of the Duke's feelings for her or anyone else, she should remain true to herself. She turned to Stephen Montgomery for company instead. As the days passed, she grew more and more appreciative of his steady presence, his sense of humor, and his good spirits. It was after dinner at a judge's house one evening that they had an interesting conversation. Their dinner companions were playing whist, and Stephen and Justina were enjoying tea by the fire. Stephen gazed at her fondly. "I have enjoyed this Christmas season more than I ever have before. You have enriched the season for me." A warm feeling spread through her. "Thank you, Stephen. I have deeply enjoyed our time together also. And I cannot begin to express how much I have adored Christmas time here in London. I have decided that I will never again spend Christmas anywhere but here. My new family doesn't know what they are missing." Stephen's eyes glowed, but then he grew somber. "There is something I want to speak with you about regarding a sensitive subject. Justina, as a lady, are you certain that you do not mind being seen with me at the theatre or accompanying me to dinner at the homes of judges and merchants?" Justina was quick to counter his concern. "No. You must never think that. Your generosity has touched me to my very heart. You have done everything in your power to personally see to my happiness this season. I am certain that you had plans before my sudden arrival here in London, and yet you and your acquaintances have welcomed me and made me feel as though I was at home, more so than my own family. From the beginning, I was afraid you were going to encounter resistance with your new family. You might well remember that I tried to warn you of your sister's spite. Yes, and you were right. I should have heeded your warning and left Helmsford Park at an earlier date. The hearts of those women are so hardened against me that they even refuse to take my money. I offered them my annuity, and they were so stubborn that they would rather be unhappy without money rather than accept a gift from me. They are fools. I believe you are right. Although, now that I am thinking more calmly, I believe I was a fool to offer them my money in the first place." She gave a wry laugh. "But now I have come to a conclusion. I would like to purchase a house in London so that I may never have to see them again." "Can I do that?" He gave her a look of admiration. As your solicitor, I would be honored to advise you in this matter. I can think of no one I would like to advise me more than you. I am counting on your help. We can start looking for a suitable house. I am certain that setting up your own residence is the best possible idea, but I would wait until spring to do so. Spring? But why should I wait? I want to buy a house now. I cannot endure the thought that my sisters could be joining me soon here in London. I can promise that it will be worth it if you wait. Spring is the best time to purchase property. Justina was not happy with this proclamation. However, it was Stephen she was speaking to, and he always had her best interest at heart. You know that I trust you completely, she said. And I am honored by that trust. I want you to be happy. His look seemed deep with meaning, and Justina found herself blushing. Did he care for her beyond their friendship? Was he developing real feelings for her? She gave a small nervous laugh, lightening the mood. Silently, she warned herself not to read anything into his words or gestures. Her imagination was sometimes too prone to take the vaguest evidence of something and enlarge it beyond recognition. Of course, they had been spending a lot of time together that season, and she was unsure if it was the magic of the season or some kind of magic between them, but she found herself considering him as more than just her solicitor and friend. Despite her self-admonition, she thought of him often and always looked forward to their next meeting. His dark eyes, devilish good looks and potent charm were a combination that was proving more difficult for her to resist, yet still, she was completely unsure of his feelings toward her. He never spoke a word that hinted at anything more than friendship. Chapter 8. Christmas Eve came, and the house was decorated with greenery. Justina made sure that the staff had a feast unlike any they had ever enjoyed before. It would be their little secret, she told them, for she was in no mood to hear any censure of how she was treating her staff with too great a familiarity. Naturally, they were perfectly willing to keep the secret if it meant a delicious feast suitable for the richest of dukes. That evening, Justina joined them in the servants' dining room, and they all had a marvelous time. They sang carols and drank punch and wassail. Being with the servants made Justina feel as though she was home. She had no one glaring at her and telling her that she was an embarrassment. Although she was well aware that she was ignoring a rule regarding socializing with the servants, but she no longer cared about the rules, at least not on Christmas Eve. The next day being Christmas, Justina woke early and attended Christmas services with patience. They returned to the house and enjoyed a delectable lunch of roast goose and fig pudding. She had just sat down in the library with a glass of Christmas punch when the footman announced the arrival of a visitor. Justina was shocked to see Charles Seaton walk through the library door. She jumped from her chair, nearly spilling her drink. "Happy Christmas! I brought you a gift," the Duke said warmly. He handed her a large present, wrapped in the strangest of ways with the paper suspended over what looked to be sticks at each corner of the gift. With her heart beating wildly, Justina opened it and discovered exotic blooms from the tropics. She breathed in their scent and was overwhelmed by his generosity. Flowers such as these were ridiculously expensive and were grown only by the wealthiest in their hothouses. "I have never seen flowers such as these before now, at least outside the pages of books cataloguing botanicals." "Thank you, Charles. I thought they would brighten your day, here in the London winter." "But Charles, London is perfectly wonderful during the season. I have had such a lovely time." "I came to wish you a Merry Christmas," he said, gazing at her. "I could not bear you being alone here in this big house." "I am not alone. I have a few members of staff. When I received your letter, I wrote to George. I hope you are not vexed with me." She wondered why in the world he would write to George about her, but she decided not to inquire. She was too pleased to see him to spoil it by thinking of her family back home. "I was not expecting you. This is a grand surprise. I will ring for tea. George told me what your sisters said to cause you to leave during Christmas. I feel partially to blame for this." "How in the world would you be to blame?" she asked, her eyes wide. "You have only been kind to me. I find you blameless in this matter. I am afraid that you should not find me so without knowing why I consider myself at fault. You are a gentleman and a duke. I am certain that there is no conceivable way you could be accountable for the ill-tempered behavior of my sisters." "Justina, You are wrong. He sat down beside her on the settee by the fire. His leg brushed against hers as he sat down, and she felt her pulse race. Had he brushed against her on purpose? She was so inexperienced with such things that she had no idea. She only knew that his touch confused her, made her self-conscious, unbalanced. She was acutely aware that they were alone in the library. The servants were elsewhere in the house. At this realization, she became flustered and looked about nervously, but he did not appear to notice. He licked his full lips and leaned in closer. Her eyes went huge, and she could almost feel his mouth touching hers when the footman knocked to signal the arrival of tea. Justina nearly jumped out of her skin. Guilt assailed her. What had they been about to do? She inhaled sharply and felt a sudden sense of disloyalty to Stephen. The footman brought the tea, sandwiches and cakes, and withdrew. When they were alone once more, Charles finished his explanation. Much to Justina's relief, he ignored the entire matter of his attempted kiss as if it had never happened. I am afraid that your sister Augusta has more reason to dislike you than just the money you have inherited. She may find our friendship to be even more reason to loathe you. Our friendship? Yours and mine? Why would she care about who I am friends with? Ordinarily, I would tend to agree with you, but unfortunately you chose me as your companion at the hunting party. Augusta and I have a history, or rather she wishes that we had a history. What do you mean you have a history? What kind of history? Justina felt dread edge into her heart. Your brother George and I have been friends for a number of years. It soon became apparent that his sister, Augusta, had feelings for me. As you might imagine, George thought it was a splendid idea that I might one day marry his sister. I remember we spoke about it. What happened? There were many concerns. The greatest obstacle was my family and our traditions. But beyond that, I was unable to reciprocate her feelings. I knew that if I was allowed to marry her, and my family would have opposed it, I would never be happy. I found her to be petty, small-minded, and dull. I thought that I had managed to make it abundantly clear that we did not have a future. Seeing that she was George's sister, I tried to spare her any additional heartbreak by making my intentions known at the earliest moment that I would not be marrying her. Obviously, she had already developed feelings for me, and I was too late. Do you believe she still cares for you? Yes, unfortunately, I find that to be the case. After the death of your father but before you arrived, George sent a letter to me listing the details of your father's will. He made the suggestion that Augusta cared a great deal for me and that her dowry was still generous. He wondered whether I would reconsider marrying her since I had not found a suitable woman to be the next Duchess. Justina felt sick to her stomach. In spite of Augusta's horrid treatment of her, Justina couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for her half-sister. Charles, if she still cares for you, then you are right to suspect that our friendship may be a thorn in her side. It is no wonder that she despises me, between your attention and the fact that I inherited the money she thought she stood to gain. The Duke shook his head. I would say that she considers you to be little more than a thief, and I must say that I understand how she came to such a conclusion. Justina blanched, her face draining of color. What do you mean by suggesting that I am a thief? He moved closer to her and answered in a whisper, You have stolen my heart and my peace of mind. He was as near as her breath. It is undoubtedly a sentimental notion, but one that I find to be the truth. Her shoulders relaxed, and she regretted her quick words. The Duke really was so sweet. He leaned in again, and this time there was no interruption from a footman bringing tea. From the moment the Duke's lips touched hers, Justina experienced a sensation unlike anything she had ever known. She felt herself slipping into a state of wonder. He kissed her kips, her cheeks, and her eyelids, and despite herself, she melted into his arms. He gave her another kiss and then held her as the fire burned brightly in the fireplace and the snow fell outside the window. Justina wanted to be content in his arms. She wanted to feel right, like she belonged. But she couldn't get Stephen out of her mind. Yet, Stephen had never made any overture toward her. Not really. Justina was certain that he only considered her a friend. And she liked the Duke. She did. But there was something else bothering her, too. Something that had been niggling at her since she'd first met the Duke of Wockshire. She did not want to ruin the moment with such a question, but she felt that it was important. Charles? Yes, Justina, he murmured. You didn't marry Augusta, but you still have not married anyone else. How can a duke manage to avoid matrimony for so long? I am afraid the answer to that question is not simple. We should discuss it at another time, not at Christmas. Justina could not imagine why he wouldn't want to discuss the subject. And what had he meant when he'd said his family would not have permitted his marriage to Augusta? What secret was he keeping? He had taken the liberty of kissing her, and he seemed to have feelings for her, yet he did not want to discuss his reasons for not marrying. She thought of how her mother had married for love but had been set aside as inferior and not worthy of being recognized in public. Justina refused to end up like her, a woman whose love and devotion went unappreciated. A woman who ended up dying alone. Perhaps Justina was being a bit melodramatic in her thinking, but she had to know. She faced him squarely. You have come to London to see me, and now here you are, by the fireside with me, holding me. I could be risking my reputation, such as it is, by entertaining you here without a proper chaperone. I feel that I must have an answer now. I do not mean to force your hand, but something inside, something in my heart, tells me that I must know why you are still not married. He shifted with obvious discomfort and stood up. He walked to the fireplace and stared into the fire. Justina, I am afraid that you may not like what I must say. My answer will not bring you comfort. Can we find no means to avoid this? Can we not enjoy our moment together on this beautiful Christmas afternoon? No, we cannot avoid this. My feelings for you could become deeper with every moment that passes. As I sit here with you, I feel I am no longer in control of my destiny. It is for that reason that I must insist on knowing why you have not married. He did not look at her as he spoke. I care for you as I have never cared for another woman. There can be no doubt of my feelings for you, try as I might to keep them under control. I find you to be the woman of my dreams, yet to answer your question, you are forcing me to hurt you. Justina could feel her heart racing. She heard his words, but why wouldn't he look at her when he spoke them? She wondered if she wanted to know his answer after all. But despite her rising anxiety, she knew that she needed to hear the truth. She could not remain in such a state of confusion and unknowing. Go on and tell me why you must hurt me. Of course, you know that I am a duke. My family is in possession of one of the noblest lineages in the realm. My family has eternally made it clear that it is my responsibility to find a wife from my own class with a pure and untainted lineage. I have been unable to find a wife from among my own rank that I find even the slightest bit attractive, yet I am bound to marry to produce an heir. Justina stared at him. Charles, do you mean that you can only marry the daughter of a duke? That is the tradition of my family. It has always been that way for us. And that is what I did not want to say to you. I find myself losing the battle that rages deep within me. I have searched for a long time to find a woman who will be my wife and bear children of the highest noble blood. I have never found one that I could marry in all good conscience. Now, I am even more frustrated in my search. The Duke returned to Justina and reached for her hand as he sat beside her. She allowed him to take it. Tears welled in her eyes. So now, she had the truth. Of all the dukes in the land, she had to become fond of one whose family would never accept her. Never. Justina, I did not count on meeting you, and after I did meet you, I never imagined that I would feel toward you as I do. Can we not always be as close we are now, no matter whom I may have to marry? Can we not continue seeing each other? She jerked her hand away from his. What was he saying? Who did he think she was? Absolutely not. How can you suggest such a thing? She glared at him with disbelief. My mother may have chosen to love a man who would not publicly claim her, but I will not. He leaned close, his eyes intense. I cannot live without you. You must understand, even if you were as Augusta and the known and accepted daughter of noble birth of an earl, I still could not marry you. Don't you understand? I am bound by 4 centuries of tradition. It is my responsibility to protect the title and the bloodline of the House of Wockshire. What is wrong with you? And what was wrong with my father? How can you justify taking advantage of a woman's heart? How can you sacrifice the love of a woman which she would freely give? For the sake of your reputation or so that your bloodline remains pure? If this is love among the upper class, I want nothing to do with it." Justina stood on trembling legs. Her heart wrenched inside her. How could she have been so wrong about this man? How could she have allowed herself to be swept under his spell? "Justina," he cried, standing up. He grasped her arm. "Please reconsider. I care for you. I might even love you." Her mouth dropped open. "And this is how you show it? By asking me to become your woman on the side." She forced back her tears. Straightening her shoulders and raising her chin, she strode from the library. The tears began falling then, and she let them fall. He couldn't see them now. She did not even bother to ask him to leave. She just climbed the stairs to her bedchamber and threw herself on her bed. She assumed that he must have left sometime after that because a knock at her door at dusk announced the unexpected arrival of Mr. Stephen Montgomery. Chapter 9. Stephen was waiting in the drawing room when she came downstairs. She was both pleased and relieved to see him. She swallowed back the bitterness of her afternoon with the Duke. She needed some Christmas cheer, and seeing Stephen expectantly waiting for her, provided it. "Lady Justina, how are you this fine Christmas day?" he asked with a warm smile. "Better, now that you are here," she answered honestly. "I am glad to hear you say so. I have brought you a present." Justina smiled, touched. "How lovely." "Thank you, Stephen." "It's nothing much. I just knew you would be spending Christmas alone, so I brought Christmas to you." Stephen walked out of the drawing room and left her. She couldn't see what it was he was doing, and she wondered what his surprise could be. Just having him there cheered her immensely, and she wished that the Duke hadn't come to visit earlier. She was better off without him. She closed her eyes. But if the Duke hadn't come, she might still be deluding herself into thinking that his intentions toward her were pure, that innocent friendship was all he wanted. She opened her eyes and let out a long sigh. She had cared for the Duke. Somewhere inside, she probably still did. But her new knowledge of his character was quickly eroding any affection she'd held for him. She clasped her hands together. She heard the front door open, and then she heard voices, several all at one time, laughing and merry. Justina was amazed to see madrigal players, several barristers, a judge, and 2 merchants and their wives enter the drawing room to wish her a happy Christmas. Everyone that Stephen brought was someone she had met during her time there. Tears moistened her eyes. She had friends there in London, real friends. And most of them were thanks solely to Stephen. Her spirits improved with each song that the madrigal players performed. They chose delightfully cheerful songs that she could hear all through the house as she slipped out to confer with patients and the staff. They did not have enough punch to go around, but there was the wine cellar. Justina gave orders to open the wine cellar. 20 minutes later, a long table was set up in the great hall. Wine and punch were set out with cuts of cold pork, thick slices of bread, and crackers and cheese. Justina was so thankful that the staff came through on short notice. She told patients to be sure that they opened a bottle of wine for themselves. "But my lady, you've already provided us with a Christmas feast. This isn't necessary." Justina squeezed her hand. "But it is." In the drawing room, Justina was treated to a joyful Christmas party. Carols were sung, charades and blind man's bluff were played, even a hand or two of whist. During the entire evening, Justina found her eyes drawn to Stephen. He was jovial and smiling and winked at her when he caught her eye. Stephen had managed to bring her Christmas. It was the best Christmas present she had ever received. After several bottles of wine, the guests decided that they would dance. Everyone was having such a marvelous time that no one cared if someone made a misstep or turned to face the wrong partner. The music was happy, and the company was good-humored. The party lasted well into the early hours of the morning. Finally, everyone but Stephen had departed. Justina faced him with a wide, if somewhat tired, smile. "Stephen, this has been so wonderful. I am truly grateful. I am glad you enjoyed it. I hope you don't mind that I invited guests to your house without your permission." "Not at all. It was a wonderful surprise. Tonight, you are truly my knight in shining armor." She felt such a kinship with him that she stood on her tiptoes and kissed him on the cheek. She heard his small gasp at her touch. He clasped her hand to his chest and cleared his throat. "There is to be a masked ball at the Lord Mayor's house this New Year's Eve. I am wondering if you would like to accompany me." "A ball?" She stifled a yawn. "Yes, that sounds like fun. I would be happy to accompany you." Stephen smiled and let go of her hand. He bid her good evening. She wished him good morning, and they laughed as he left. She climbed the stairs and could not help but smile. Stephen and his friends had restored her lagging spirits. She hummed a Christmas carol all the way to her bedchamber, where she collapsed on her bed in exhaustion. Justina did not hear from the Duke in the days that followed Christmas, for which she was grateful. The more she pondered the situation with him, the more disillusioned she became. She found her feelings toward him turning first to anger and then to pity. The Duke wasn't likely to ever find true love. Not with the expectations of his forefathers. She felt sorry for him, but that was all. Her confusion was gone, replaced by a surety of emotion that made her heart sing. Ever since Christmas had passed, she knew where her true affection lay. 3 days after Christmas, Stephen sent her a lovely bouquet of flowers and stopped by for tea. She was always delighted by his presence, for he never asked for anything in return. He simply came and enjoyed her company, just as she enjoyed his. Justina wondered how she had ever found herself wavering between him and the Duke. The night of the New Year's ball, Justina dressed in a beaded ruby-red ball gown. She had a black lace mask over her eyes, and her hair was curled in round ringlets held by a black tiara. Patience had once again outdone herself. Justina looked in the mirror and saw that she still wore the necklace Charles had given her. She felt an odd sensation in her heart as she unlocked the clasp and pulled it from her neck. She held the locket and thought of the words inscribed within. She was being true to herself. She opened a drawer in her desk and dropped the locket in it. Stephen was waiting downstairs in the great hall when she descended the staircase. He was dressed as a cavalier, complete with a feather hat and mask. Justina paused for the slightest moment, taking in his appearance. He was strikingly handsome. "Justina," he said with a low whistle, "you are breathtaking." She smiled and floated down the steps. She placed her hand on top of his to be led outside. "So are you," she responded with a smile. His carriage waited out front. As they rode to the Lord Mayor's residence, Justina teased him. "Stephen, you are a handsome man. In that costume, I am afraid that I will have to fight other women for even a scrap of your attention." His cheeks colored. "Don't be silly. Only you can hold my attention. That red dress makes you look like the fairy queen herself." Justina was delighted with his compliment, and she wanted to keep their pleasant banter going. "You should be dressed as a highwayman because I am certain you will steal hearts." "Justina," he said, his voice growing serious. She tensed. Was he upset about something? "Yes, Stephen." "It's nothing." He gazed out the carriage window. "Look, we are here." The Lord Mayor's house was lit by candles and several footmen were standing outside in full livery. Flags and banners hung from the columns of the grey stone mansion. Guests were arriving from all directions dressed in colourful costumes. "Stephen, you didn't tell me it was going to be so well attended." "It always is. I thought you would enjoy the festivity." "I am so pleased that you invited me," she exclaimed as the carriage came to stop. A footman opened the door, and Stephen and Justina stepped out of the carriage. She glanced at Stephen and thought of the first time they had arrived somewhere together. It was back at Helmsford Park. She shook her head and looked at the handsome man at her side and could not help but smile at how long ago it all seemed. So much had changed. Her entire life had changed. The Lord Mayor himself greeted them and invited them to partake of a glass of punch and make merry. Stephen led Justina to the ballroom, and they immediately took to the floor to dance an Irish jig. Justina laughed with delight and danced with Stephen 3 dances in a row. It was indeed a heady night. As Justina had predicted, some ladies hinted for a dance with Stephen. He obliged them, while various gentlemen lined up to dance with her. More than once, she caught Stephen's eye during the evening, and every time, his gaze made her blush. All evening, they danced and laughed with Stephen's friends and acquaintances. Justina felt like she had entered the fairy realm, wondering if she would have to return to her life as a maid when it was over. She gazed at Stephen and hoped that she would always be this happy. At the close of the ball, they climbed back into the carriage. Justina's feet were sore from all the dancing, and she fretted that she would be hobbling by the next morning. On the drive back, Stephen sat beside her in the convents instead of across from her. He put his arm around her, and she lay her head sleepily on his shoulder. It had been a wonderful evening. "Stephen, thank you for this evening, for Christmas, for New Year's, for everything," she murmured. "I have never had so much fun." His arm tightened around her shoulder. "I told you when I met you that I wanted to see you happy." "Yes, and you meant it. I gave my word to your father. But I must admit something." Justina had nearly dozed off, but at his words, she roused. "A confession?" She prayed it would not spoil her impression of him. He was her friend and her companion, and she could not imagine living in London without him. "What must you admit?" She held her breath. "Justina, do you remember when I told you to wait to buy a house until spring?" "Yes." "I was not completely honest." "You can purchase a house anytime you want to, and I will help you." "Then why? Why did you lie to me?" She worked to quell the sense of disappointment in her heart. "I wanted to have time to win you over." "You what?" She sat up straight and looked at his shadowed face. "I know it was silly of me, but I have loved you since that day I saw you at Lady Harrington's." Justina stared at him. Could it be true? She blinked, and the only thing she could think of to say was, "Stephen, I looked so dowdy in my maid's uniform." "I did not see your maid's uniform. I saw a beautiful woman instead. I was not expecting to fall in love with you." "You love me?" The words were beginning to take hold, and her heart raced. "Yes, I love you. And to prove my sincerity, if you were to allow me to court you and to marry you, I would see to it that your annuity remains yours. I would not want you to ever doubt my love for you as genuine." "Stephen, you want to court me and marry me? In public, for all to see?" He gave her a strange look. "Why, of course, in public." He grabbed her hands. "I hope that I have not spoken hastily." She shook her head, and tears came to her eyes. "I can think of no man I would rather be courted by than you," she said. Joy filled her heart. She watched his expression and could see his excitement at her words. "You agree then? Our courtship would perhaps give you time to grow to love me." Raw hope filled his voice. "If you asked me to marry you today, I would say yes." His eyes widened. "Justina, dare I hope? Could you care for me? I already care for you, and I know in my heart that I will love you deeply. I can think of nowhere else I would rather be than here in London with you." He grabbed her up and hugged her to his chest. "My darling, we can live anywhere you choose. Anywhere. You have made me so happy." He pressed his lips to hers, kissing her over and over again. And it felt good and right. Justina laughed and wrapped her arms around him. Stephen tenderly touched her cheek with the back of his hand. "Justina, your happiness is my only concern. So, you will marry me and be my wife?" After an appropriate time of courting. Justina thought of the locket in the drawer in her desk and the words inscribed on it, "To thine own self, be true." She looked into Stephen's dark eyes, and she said without hesitation, "Yes. I will marry you. You love me for me, as I truly am, and you do not wish to change me. Just as I have no wish to change you. You are perfect as you are. I gladly say yes, my dearest Stephen." Stephen leaned close until she could feel his breath caress her face. Again, he touched his lips to hers, at first tentatively, and then with a deeper pressure and need. She returned his kiss with an ardor equal to his own. A flame was ignited within her that began to burn brightly. The passion and love she felt in Stephen's kiss was only the promise of more to come. As he held her in his arms, Justina closed her eyes and thought of their future together. He wanted a courtship, but she hoped to convince him to be married by spring. She opened her eyes and looked up at him. He smiled at her and reached for her hand, pressing it to his lips. Justina laughed with joy. Marrying him was most definitely being true to herself and to her heart. And she didn't need the locket to tell her so. The end. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story by Grace Austen. You can be assured that all her books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Grace Austen, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Grace Austen romance.